Welcome to the Friendmue Podcast. Our special guest is a multi-talented individual. His skills range from taekwondo and professional dancing to acting and stunt work for movies and live shows. A devoted father and a man beloved around the world for his voiceover work in the Shenmue games as series protagonist Ryo Hazuki. The voice of Shenmue, Corey Marshall. Thanks for being on the show, brother.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things that endears you to so many fans is that it seems like this isn't just a job to you, that you actually enjoy what you do and you have a real passion and affection for the fans.
Yeah, the thing is that, I really do count myself as one of the luckiest individuals I know. I'm not only a fan of games myself, I'm a big fan of animation as well. Two things that I've been doing my entire life. Somehow I ended up doing one of the greatest jobs in the world, doing voiceover. So not only am I just count myself to be extremely lucky to be doing something like that, but to have fans, it really validates me to know that in the end, I really just want to try and do something good. I want to do something that people like, and I want to create good content, not just for the fans, but for me as well. But when people tell me that how much they enjoy my work, it really is something special to me, because when I interact with people, when I interact with those fans, and they describe their stories to me and how much Shenmue means to them, it really is something special, and I truly love that. And I think maybe I just think about how important certain things were to me, and how for example, certain films or certain games really affected me in my life, and how it really shaped me as a person. And when people tell me how I was able to do the same thing for them, I think, wow, that's really quite something special, and it means a lot to me.
That's great, and that is you. That's definitely the case. I think that part of the reason people appreciate your role that you've played as Ryo Hazuki is just because it's such a unique journey that life has taken you personally on. You're just a young kid, 19 years old. You get to do this crazy voiceover game for this monumental game, Yu Suzuki's magnum opus. You fly out to Japan. I mean, that's just crazy. Like, what an amazing journey your life took you on. And I think that as far as your performance, it's so unique because I don't think anybody ever had a job quite like that. Or to put it in other words, I don't think anybody had the opportunity to play a role as an actor in that kind of a situation before, because this is a video game that's like pretty much the first game that really mainstreamed the concept of open world games, and you had
Right.
so much dialogue, and you were able to interact with so many NPCs. It's a very unique role that you fit very well.
Yeah, so when you talk about the sheer scope of it, a lot of games were kind of flirting with it at the time. And we had you could see where things were trying to go, but in order, yeah, you're right. Shenmue was so much ahead of its time when it really came to, you know, I tell a lot of people that maybe haven't had the opportunity to play the original games. Now that they can, I think, like, I want to let them know, like, hey, if you really love where games are today, if you love something like God of War, or Red Dead Redemption, or whatever you're playing right now, um, games like that exist today because of Shenmue, right? So
Absolutely.
so you're right. Going in there, and I remember thinking, like, wow, you can open up any drawer you want. You can you can rifle through his house. You know what I mean? You can talk to anybody on the street. I mean, anybody. And each person, like, okay, so somebody's working on a street corner. Maybe they own a shop on the street corner and they're outside. Well, they see people passing all day, so that person has more information than the person who's working inside Tomato Mart or something like that, right?
Right.
Maybe they don't know, or maybe you talk to somebody of a certain age because they might know something, or somebody who's somebody who's a student might know some more information. And each person is special in particular because of that. And yeah, you're right. It's something like that hadn't really happened before, and it was pretty amazing to have that opportunity. And I remember thinking like, this is what I've always wanted games to be.
Yeah, really.
So to see it unfolding before my eyes, I thought, great, cool. This is where we're going. It's finally happening, and I was excited to be a part of something like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's totally understandable. I think anyone would be. The game was so unprecedented, and by extension, that made your role in the game and your performance totally unprecedented. I don't think you really had many peers that could say, here's one to one the type of job I've done before. Like video game voice acting wasn't on that level at the time. And so you really raised the bar in that sense, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I guess I don't know if I really thought about that at the time. You know what I mean? I guess I was just excited to be a part of something of that scope. And of course, to be working with Yu Suzuki and games that I know and love that he has created. I guess maybe it was just my youthful ignorance or something. I just kind of felt like this is what I've always wanted. This is what I've worked for. Of course, it was exciting, but I just kind of felt like, this is where I wanted to be. This is where I should be. And the thing is, I've been acting for a long time. I think probably since I was about 10. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and just everything. I've tried, being in TV and commercials and doing a lot of stage work and just doing all the work in general.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely that I knew that was the pinnacle of my work at that time. And yeah, just really just incredibly happy and humbled to be there, But it's just that I knew that all the work that I had done up to that point led me where I was. So it's kind of like I tell this a lot to people. If you really want to be in the business, you just have to work and work all the time.
Right.
And everything you do has to be dedicated to that. I mean, really, you are your job when you're an actor, so you have to work on everything. All of your skills all the time have to be dedicated to the arts. And I mean, like if you're going for a character role, you have to look like that, right?
Yes.
If you're going for if you're going for the hot guy, you have to go for that. You know what I mean? Like you got to spend all your time in the gym, and
That's
you know
right.
what I mean? So I just kind of felt like
facelifts, or not a facelift, but like a facial with put the little cucumbers on your eyes and the avocado spread.
Take care of yourself, that kind of thing. But
I'm not trying to talk about your personal life too much or anything. I was just.
But I just kind of felt like, all the hard work that I had put into my life had really come to a point right there, and I was just so happy and to be there, and I felt very, very lucky.
Well, that's such a fascinating perspective. I appreciate you sharing that. I wanted to ask you because I'm a fan of the AM2 podcast, which I believe the couple of Canadian guys that interviewed you before, and they asked you an interesting question. They said, "Are you happy with the way the English voice acting had turned out for the game as a whole?" And you kind of got a little bit pensive about it, and you were thinking, well, am I not? Because I think that undeniably, and it could be part of the charm of Shenmue, there is a very campy quality to it, to much of the voice acting.
Yeah. I think I did end up saying that in the end too. I said, well, we are where we are today because of how it ended up, right?
Yeah.
And the reason I was thinking about it is because a lot of people talk about it, and a lot of people complain, and a lot of people say, well, it should have been this or it should have been that. And I think, well, but so many people love Shenmue for what it is, and would it have had more success if we had just the world's best voice actors in there? Maybe. I don't know. But at the same time, Shenmue is what it is, and people have this passion about Shenmue because of how it ended up, you know? So it's
Right.
hard for me to say yes or no. At the same time, I have to say, like, hey, it ended up the way that it did, and so many people loved it, and it changed so many people's lives, and it has become this like deep cult classic game.
Yeah,
And
which is
I
so
have to
cool.
say, yeah, and I have to say that I'm quite proud to be a part of something like that, you know?
Yeah, as you should be.
So can I? It's hard for me to say yes or no because I think like, hey, I'm happy with where it is, what's
Yeah.
happened to it. We had the opportunity because of how passionate the fans were.
Right.
I believe because of their passion and because of their tenacity and because of they just won't let it go. You know what I mean? Every little bit and piece of shred of information that comes over the web, the whole community goes insane, and they all talk
Yep.
about it. And, you know,
I've
I
had
remember,
friends come up to me and say, "Can you just move on from the Shenmue thing? It's 2012," and I'm like, "Never. I will
right,
never move on."
right.
Yeah.
So I remember once I was in Vegas and I entered this room that had all these really amazing um, arcade games, and one of them they had a whole section of really great because Sega makes some really great arcade games,
Okay.
and I remember taking a picture. I had my hand up, and it had a big old Sega logo or whatever, you know, and I just took a casual picture. And like all of a sudden, Shenmue 3 confirmed, and you know
Yeah.
Corey Marshall's back in Japan voicing Shenmue 3. He sent this picture as a teaser, and I was like, "Oh no, oh no, I set him off. I
Yeah.
forgot. I should have put some context to that."
Oh
But
no. That's
I
so funny.
remember there was a huge explosion. But you know, the thing is that uh,
Those were the
because
days.
yeah, right, because Shenmue is what it is. You know, people are so and I keep saying passionate because I think that's what it is. You know, people are so passionate about it.
Definitely.
Um,
The
that
campiness could have, I'm sorry to cut you off there, or
I was just
interject, but I just wanted to bring up, I think maybe perhaps the campiness could have been a blessing in disguise.
mhm,
I think is what you're getting at. And so at the time you think, oh, maybe not, maybe that's not the best choice, but then in hindsight, it works in its favor. I would concede that a lot of the NPCs are campy, and a lot of people are critical of Shenmue's voice acting. But where I take issue is when people are critical of your performance, or Eric Kelso, or Paul Lucas, or Leslie Wilkerson, or people don't talk about this lady a lot, but Ruth Hollyman, the voice actress of
yeah,
Nozomi, she was great.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and so I will die on that hill and say that you guys, like the central characters, had really compelling performances, and especially yours. And I want to talk about, if I may, a little bit uh, on why I feel that your performance of Ryo was so compelling, because I was sucked in at that intro scene where Ryo loses his father, and
yeah,
Ryo does the iconic, no, and and the thunder and everything. And just some people are kind of critical of the way Ryo is portrayed, because he seems kind of wooden, kind of stilted, kind of
sure,
like a blank, but he's kind of a blank canvas that you can project yourself onto. His
yeah,
personality is a little more subtle, so it's not too overpowering.
right,
But I've had some experiences recently in my life, and it's given me a different perspective, because Ryo had just experienced extreme loss, and he was completely shell shocked.
mm,
And when you face a loss of that caliber, what happens to you is you become kind of numbed, like a little bit of PTSD in a way. Because, like, I mean, even Ryo, he'll dream about Landy killing his dad over and over. He'll have flashbacks,
mhm,
and when he walks around, it's like everybody's moving on with their lives, but he can't. His life's
yeah,
over. It's been obliterated, and so he's just kind of numb. And everyone's like, "Hey, Ryo, come do this," and he's just going through the motions and thinking, this sucks. This is awful. Like, I feel like the way that your performance of Ryo in Shenmue 1 and 2 was so believable, from the perspective of someone who'd experienced loss at that level. I think that's
mhm,
exactly how somebody would behave and would
yeah,
look for redemption or
yeah,
revenge.
yeah, and so if you look at look his dialogue as well. You know what I mean? When you look at the things that he says, right?
Yeah.
I think you're right in a way where he internalizes most of his thoughts, right?
Right.
And when he says something, it's just really just to the point. You know what I mean? There's no
Hmm.
frills. There's no he even with the people that he once was friends with, or the people that he once had a relationship with, like Nozomi or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you look at his dialogue, he's basically cut that off.
Yeah. He's
He's
receding.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you can see in the games where we were talking about Nozomi here, where she's trying to reach out, she's trying to get to him,
Yeah.
and he just totally cuts her off. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
when you look at the dialogue, I always when they describe the character to me,
Mhm.
I had this vision of already he was the stoic individual. I think about Iwao, his father, and I think about him teaching from father to son all of his knowledge, his martial arts, and all of his life philosophies and things like that.
Yeah. A lot of
So
discipline.
a lot of discipline. So he's already there. He's already in that headspace, and then suddenly everything gets taken away.
Mhm.
He no longer interacts with Fukuhara-san. He no longer has that relationship with Ine-san, right?
Right.
Um,
Or
uh,
anyone really, any of his friends.
yeah, anybody, all of his school friends, all gone, everything, and he's laser focused on he's just decided that he has this problem and he's going to solve it, and
Right.
that's all he's got on his mind all the time. So he doesn't mince words. He doesn't beat around the bush, right? When he has something on his mind, he's going to accomplish that. And when I was looking at that dialogue, that's just what I saw. That's just
Yeah.
what uh, when I was thinking about his character and what he was going through, just like you mentioned, and I saw the words on the page, I said, this is how he's gonna say it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, the thing is that um, I I wish that um, I kind of feel like, and especially with a lot of the stage work I do too, I
Mhm.
end up. My daughter ended up getting into a local production here of Little Red Riding Hood, and they asked me to audition, and I was like, "Oh no, that's okay, thanks. I'm just here for my daughter." And they
Mhm.
said, "No, no, we need some people. Maybe you could audition. And, we'll see where we could put you, or whatever." And I was like, "Okay, fine." So they ended up giving me the dialogue for the big bad wolf, and I went in there and I just totally just had this crazy outrageous character, put on this accent, and just totally over the top, right?
Right.
And they ended up casting me as the big bad wolf. So I was like, okay, fine. So the thing is
You got
that
to keep the
yeah,
beard, probably.
oh yeah, I did. That was
Yeah.
the best part, because a lot of times, they want you to shape your face or whatever. If you're a younger character, obviously they want me to take it off. But luckily, I got a chance to keep all this on.
Yeah, man.
And yeah, that character was just stupid, over the top, like crazy acting, and just like he gets caught at the end, and he does this whole whimpering speech, and it's just, you know what I mean? Like, as
Yeah.
an actor, you have to be able to pull all kinds of things out of your hat. So, you know, and that kind of work just does not fit Hazuki at all. You know what I mean? So yeah, can I put more acting into it? Yeah, of course I could. But I just didn't feel that that was the character. And I even spoke to the Japanese team, and we talked about the character, and they said, no, we love the way you do it.
Yeah.
um we when you did the audition, we were looking for somebody um who had a natural speaking voice that we liked, and we're looking for somebody who when they came in with that character, that um uh their choices is what we were looking for, and we liked your choices. So I was like, hey,
Yeah.
if that's what they want, and that's what I saw in the character, then that's how we're gonna go. You know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
I
I don't
think,
think anybody really doubts that you have the range to do more with your performance. It's just more of a less is more kind of thing. And
hmm
I think your artistic choice was so powerful. in those games. And it resonated with a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think I got a lot of inspiration from perhaps a lot of the Japanese animation that I used to watch, or a lot of the old samurai films that I used to watch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, uh, so um, there are several characters that are, I keep using the word stoic, right?
Hmm.
Where they are on a mission, or like you mentioned as well just previously in this interview, where something terrible has happened in their life, and they go through life with um this hardened personality now, because
Yeah.
it's like
It's like he became a
they've been
different person.
tempered by the fire, right?
Tempered by the fire. Exactly right. Yeah. It's like he became a different person because I think that there may be evidence that Ryo was a lot more cheerful. However stoic he may have been, that he was a little more cheerful and he interacted more with people because you look through his room and there'll be pictures of him smiling with friends and he's close, he's warm, and none of that warmth is there anymore. It's like his innocence was completely robbed. And
So,
yeah.
one thing that I've pointed out to people is that, and you'll see it more in 3. I give I um we kind of I almost feel like, because this has happened, um we he was okay. So in the beginning of his life, he was um uh he was Spock, right? He was human. He was human
Yeah.
trying to become emotionless, right?
Yeah.
And then 1986 happened, and his father died, and suddenly he became Data, where he's not human anymore, but trying to become human. You know what I mean? I
Okay.
almost look at Shenmue as uh, almost his journey to regain his humanity,
Yes.
where he has these people interacting with him, these people who were in his life, and he's slowly starting to become human again. And you
Hmm.
can see that as the progression of the story goes. I mean, if you look where 1 and then where 2 leads you, and we'll see in 3, when people start to play it. But I really truly believe that he is regaining his humanity.
Yeah, that's
And
beautiful. Yeah.
I
I
think
think
that's the journey that he is currently on.
definitely. I think with his suffering and with the trials he's been placed in, or that have been thrust upon him, you think that here's what's at stake: your life is at stake, or your friends are at stake, or the world is at stake. But really, what's really at stake is Ryo's humanity, and that's what people are trying to help him understand and trying to help him so that he won't lose that. I'm very excited to see where that path will take him in Shenmue 3. And I wanted to get some of your thoughts on that game that's coming up pretty soon. We're less than 100 days away. I think we're at 90, 93, 94, who's counting, days away,
Yeah.
November 19th.
Somebody, I'm sure somewhere, is counting.
PhantomRiverstone.com has every day he's got a ticker.
Of
Yeah.
course.
So, you know, I'm aware that you were at E3. Did you get a chance to play the demo at all? Did they let you do that?
Yeah, I sure did.
Yeah.
That was great. Yu Suzuki is actually a really great guy. I think probably people have ideas about him and
Oh,
who they think he is, but he's actually, I almost see Shenmue as his child. You know what I mean? Like
right.
he's so proud of it. He really loves to show it off, to show people, and he loves to talk about it. And when we play the game, we just talk about everything. I mean, we talk about everything from programming, just to the story about the children or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Different characters, different people that he um, different interactions with people that he's had in his life that he actually puts into the game. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So it was great to play the demo. It's great to see um, uh, all of the improvements that we've been able to make. It's definitely
Yeah.
a modern game.
It looks like it's
Um,
really coming together. I'm very impressed with it so far. Can't wait to see how it turns out.
Yeah, when we played the demo, it was pretty close to done, but they still had some more, I believe, textual things to take care of.
Yeah,
A few more, just a little bit more refinement as far as the look and stuff like that is concerned. But
yeah,
yeah, all the stuff is great. I love all of the new games that we get to play.
mhm,
Some of the new training aspects really make a lot of sense, and that's a lot of fun.
sure.
Um, and it's funny. People were talking about some of the combat. I ended up doing. There's probably people who are paying attention know that there was a couple of people that you can go fight. There's the bookie with the scar on his face. People
Yes,
remember that. And then there's also the you can go to the kung fu school and do some fighting or some practicing there. When I ended up doing, because your demo is you only have so much time, and I ended up
yeah,
playing
like
some games
15
and stuff
minutes.
like that. Of course, yeah, you only had 15 minutes, and of course I had to spend some money and play some games. But
Yeah.
I ended up fighting the bookie with the scar on his face, and I thought the combat was great. I think some people were they were a little bit concerned about the combat, but
Yeah.
for some reason, the one that I played, it looked good. To me, it looked great. I thought the combat was like modern combat with a lot of the games that we play now. The weight was good. When you strike, you can see or even feel the weight of the punch taking the opponent back. When he throws the elbow and stuff like that. Distance between the fighters was good.
Mm.
I think one person was complaining a little bit about the combat in the over at the training school. Unfortunately, I didn't get to do that one, but
Oh, okay.
again, I think the not all of it was complete. So,
Yeah, and I'm not sure if
there's
the footage we had of it from E3 was the same as the demo footage. It could have been old footage that was released to let us look at. See, I'm interested to hear your thoughts about this because this is coming from someone who is a fan of the games. And it
Mhm.
sounds like as a fan, so far you're very pleased, which is very heartening. And I wanted to know because I know you can't talk about a lot of things, but can you talk about some of the things that make you the most excited or optimistic for this game?
um yeah, I have to say it's all about story for me, right?
Hmm.
Um, of course, when we're talking about Shenmue is a story-driven game. We care about what happens. We care about the characters and all that kind of stuff. A lot, there's a lot of really great games out there that's very action-based. That's very, it's like there's a lot of games where you still just have cinematic sequences in between long bouts of action. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, but uh, with Shenmue, it is all about story, and in Shenmue 3, things really start to get interesting. And for anybody, there are still some people who are playing 1 and 2 as we speak, but I guess
Guilty.
yeah, okay. So I don't want to give away too much for anybody who hasn't
Oh,
completed
I see.
2.
You mean for first timers, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for first timers, because there are unfortunately, yeah, there are some first timers out there who are hearing about Shenmue, maybe just because they're young, you know what I mean? Maybe they're hearing about Shenmue because of all the buzz and all that kind of stuff. But
Well, how
anyway,
about this? Spoilers, people. In five
yeah, so
seconds,
for
we're going to talk some
spoilers right now, if
spoilers.
anybody hasn't finished, 2, just beware.
Yep, that was your
Anyway,
spoiler alert. Tune out now. So go ahead, Corey.
so we all know that the end of Shenmue 2, something happens, right? Something's different. We end up in the cave and we realize that things are not exactly maybe that we thought. Because we go from a relatively, well, I mean, he's going through an extraordinary circumstance, but let's just say everything's been pretty real, pretty grounded
Yeah,
on
in the
Earth.
mundanity of life.
Yeah, it's all something that we can relate to. When we get to the end of Shenmue 2, we think, "Oh, wait a minute. Whoa, what is this? What is this magic floating sword in
Sword,
the middle
yeah.
of a cave, right?" And
Yeah,
you
right.
realize, "Oh, wait, something's different. Life is suddenly different." Where this top talk of destiny, magic, phoenix mirrors, Sure, we talked about Phoenix mirrors and the end of the world and all that kind of BS. Okay, well, what's that? What?
That's just
But then
legends.
yeah, it's all legends, just like you think everything else is, right? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, some ancient Chinese legend. Okay, great, end of the world, sure. But
Hmm.
then you get to the end of two, and you're like, oh, wait a minute,
Yeah, you get a brush with the supernatural.
maybe there is something there. It is definitely supernatural. It's definitely different, and suddenly, life is different. Maybe there
Mm.
is something to these Phoenix mirrors. Maybe there is. So, what I'm
Anything could happen.
yeah, what I'm excited about three the most is the continuation of that, where obviously he's going to start finding out what all this is. What is this destiny? What is this prophecy that's been coming up? What are these Phoenix mirrors, and what do they truly do? So that's what I'm most excited about because suddenly it's a different story. You know what I mean?
So you're
Uh,
excited for the fans to get to learn how the story progresses because it's very pleasing to you. Like it's good. The story
yeah,
so
yeah,
far.
but again, with it being a story-based, character-driven game, I want to know, like, whoa, what's going on with these mirrors? What I mean, and what is this path that he has been put on, and why is he suddenly there? It looks like, you know, uh,
Mm.
not giving too much away, but
Right.
yeah,
Yes. Of course.
it's the continuation of that of those ideas of that story where everything is not as we previously thought. So
That sounds really epic. Speaking of epicness, the Shenmue series frequently has Ryo traveling to different countries. He's interacting with all kinds of different cultures. I think that our mutual friend, Adam Koralik, once coined the phrase the cultural significance of Shenmue.
yeah,
And what are there some ways that, or I guess I could put it like this, in what ways do you think that Shenmue has cultural significance?
yeah. Well, um, people and culture and knowledge in general are some of the most important fundamentals um, th- that anybody can gain.
Hmm.
So when you when you look at other people and other ways of life, it's like being able to enrich your own. So we're looking at different times, we're looking at different peoples, and we're getting an introduction into their life and their world. So when they built Shenmue, they went through painstaking. Um, uh, well, let me put it this way: they sent teams of people out to scour the countryside, and they took massive amounts of photos of buildings, city layouts or town layouts, architecture, statues. They even took pictures of bridges and things like that because they wanted to make sure that they got all of that correct. They wanted to um, get costuming correct, and then they built these amazing characters over the top of all that, right? So
Definitely.
you're
Even like Kowloon City, it no longer exists, but one of the most faithful recreations of it is in a video game. How
yeah,
bizarre.
exactly. So, and I remember we were just talking about that just recently with the destruction of Notre Dame, right?
Hmm.
Where it's faithfully in massive detail now preserved inside of a video game, which is crazy and bizarre if you think about it. A cultural treasure is now preserved inside of a video game for anybody to go in and walk around, and
I hadn't heard that. What is it, Assassin's Creed or something like
that's
that?
Assassin's Creed, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So,
Hmm.
we have lots of photos and things like that, but to be able to walk around in an immersive
So you're
environment
saying
like that.
video games can become a medium for cultural and historical preservation.
Yes,
Yeah.
and we would be able to interact with it in a way that most people haven't even really thought of.
Dude, you're blowing my mind right now. What if it was like, okay, history class kids, hop in the Animus. You're gonna go relive 1492. like you get to interact with history yourself. You have to play this game to learn history. I mean, the possibilities would be very encouraging there. That's a very interesting take. I hadn't considered that.
So, we have a lot of historical fictions. We have books that people are able to put fictional characters in that interact with real history and real events and real, let's just say they built a character that interacts with Abraham Lincoln, and there's, the, you get to be there with some of his when he maybe you prevent an assassination attempt when he's giving his address, right?
Yeah.
So you're able to be there within the space. You're seeing what's happening, but you're also playing a game at the same time. Maybe you end up speaking of an assassination attempt, maybe you end up being in Ford Theater, right?
Yeah.
So the thing is that
that seems like it would be so much more effective than listening to a lecture.
Right.
Experiencing it almost firsthand. It's like we're one step closer to the Star Trek Enterprise holodeck.
Right. And I think with the advent of a lot of VR and stuff like that that's going on, I think that we could really take that to the next level. Just like you said, people will be able to immerse themselves in a way that we'll be able to be entertained at the same time as
educated
and in a way that maybe you didn't realize you were being educated.
That's the best way. Oh, dang it. Have you ever seen that thing on The Simpsons where they're playing a video game and then one of the kids goes, "Oh, I'm learning, yuck," and they drop the controller, but like they didn't realize it at first, as long as you trick them into it. That was a very thoughtful response. I enjoyed that quite a lot. Thank you, Corey. I had a small take on that as well. Adam Korlick and I had previously discussed some of the cultural significance of Shenmue, and my take on it was a little bit different than his, but I was thinking about something else as well, because I was thinking about some of the history and the friction between Japan and China, in their history. And in a way, the Shenmue games seem like a love letter from a Japanese man to Chinese culture.
Yeah.
And that's so sweet. That's such a healing, beautiful attempt by someone to do that. I think that's so great that he shows his appreciation that way.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was actually speaking about some of that, and there were some concerns actually about some of the tension between the Japanese and the Chinese people, and I was like, well, those things do exist.
Yes, always, right.
And to just deny that is fake, and
right.
we should know that those things do exist. But you're right, because in Shenmue we have the opportunity to see two different types of people, right? Mm-hmm. So we are able to see Japanese people, Japanese culture, and experience a little bit of life in Japan in 1986 for this character, right?
Yes.
And then we get to go to China, we get to see what it's like in the city, and I think probably again, for any spoilers, we know that Hazuki does leave the city and he goes into the countryside for the third game. So for anybody who doesn't know that, turn away. But
right.
so in the third game we're seeing something completely different. We're seeing what life is like in the countryside in a small town out in the middle of the mountains, for a culture of people. And I think that's it. You get to experience that culture and be immersed in it. Yeah. You get to see how people, even when we're talking about legends or prophecies and things like that are made up for the game, we get to see how these stories or these legends are built for a culture. You know what I mean? Because it's tied completely to who they are as a people.
Yes, and you get to play as a protagonist who gains a greater appreciation for a new culture, and
Right.
as the player, you in turn gain that appreciation. You
Right.
leave with a more positive outlook, and I think that's such a great thing. And it makes me wonder if maybe that great like maybe Shenmue will have a chance to finally break into that great untapped Chinese market. That'd be awesome if people in China felt flattered or felt um, touched by Suzuki-san's heartfelt uh, portrayal of and respect for Chinese culture.
Yeah. And the thing is that he has been doing that. Um, if you think about it, the entire time.
Yes.
Well, except let's just say perhaps at the very beginning, because this guy comes in, he's obviously Chinese, he's wearing Chinese clothing, and you think, oh, this Chinese guy is the bad guy. But then you
Yeah.
realize as you go on that his whole journey is intertwined with people of different cultures. Not only do we have Tom, who's an American, but we have people from China who end up helping him along his way as well, learning kung
Definitely.
learning kung fu, learning life philosophies, and as I described earlier in this interview, becoming more human.
Mm.
So um, we realized that his journey is not about finding this bad guy, but his journey is about um, what things are filling him up again and making him whole.
I wanted to ask you, are you familiar at all with the Virtua Fighter series, or at least
Yeah.
Shenmue's genesis as a Virtua Fighter RPG?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, great. Well, it made me think about when it was supposed to be Virtua Fighter RPG: The Legend of Akira. You get to see Yu Suzuki's kind of story map, and Akira travels all throughout China. But I did
Yeah.
some research. I found out that when Yu Suzuki was developing or producing, managing Virtua Fighter 2, he himself had traveled throughout China to interact with different cultures, meet different
Hmm.
martial artists to incorporate
Hmm.
them into his video game. So I
Hmm.
almost feel like, in a way, that Ryo is Yu Suzuki because he's kind of like, hey, this was such a great adventure. I should make a game that lets everybody do what I did and go through China and meet different cultures and
Yeah.
interact with martial artists.
I think a great writer is the type of person who puts in, and I mentioned this earlier too, things that have happened in their lives, or they're able to incorporate that into their story because that is what makes it more real, because those are genuine experiences that somebody has had. So when he writes somebody's journey through China, like you just mentioned, it's actually his journey, but he's putting this story over the top of that.
Yeah,
So when he Yu Suzuki is the type of guy who knows. I mean, I don't know him personally, but I from what I see, he's the type of guy that knows that he needs to go somewhere and find that inspiration. He needs to do whatever research and all that kinds of things that he needs to do is one thing, but actually immersing himself, for example, in the Chinese culture
yeah,
is one of the best ways to be able to create this stories. And I think that's probably why one of the reasons he comes up with such great stories is because he knows that he can personally immerse himself and then put his experiences into his writing.
definitely.
So
And he really shows as well how the martial arts can be used as a bridge between cultures. So many people have a misconception that the martial arts are just for destruction, but it can actually forge bonds between different people and schools, and it can be a good thing for cultural diffusion and cross pollination.
right. Um, well, I mean, if you think about it, uh, the 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 martial arts, the fighting arts in general have brought the world together. Think
Yeah,
about think about all of the competitions that we have all around the world, where we bring people from all over the world, where you have somebody from Ireland fighting somebody from Brazil. You know what I mean? And you're going to have people who are going to have hopefully healthy competitions between peoples or nations or whatever. And we can I think probably one of the best examples of that is the Olympics, right?
Right.
So in the Olympics, there's a lot of combat arts. There's a lot, you got the fighting arts, everything from judo to they even have marksmanship. Whether it's with a rifle or whether it's with a bow and arrow and all that kind of stuff. Those are
Right.
combat arts.
Right.
But we all come together. We all celebrate our our athletes, our champions, right? And we can come together in a sense of love and community, even
Yeah.
if it's just for a little while in these competitions,
Yeah,
right? And
even if
we
it's
can,
just for a couple of weeks. One of
right,
those Olympic combat sports is Taekwondo, which you
right.
yourself are skilled in. And I wanted to ask you how you think that, um, or I guess in what ways has your martial arts background in Taekwondo influenced your performance of Ryo Hazuki? And maybe this is, I hate to ask two questions at once, but do you think Sega took your background in Taekwondo into account when they were hiring you for the job?
Yeah. To answer the second question right away, yes. In fact, I've got confirmation from that
Mm,
that that was when they saw that was a part of my resume. They took that into consideration, and they thought that was a positive. And to go back to the first, definitely, because when I studied Taekwondo, it's real different than today. Today, what I'm noticing anyway is that most Taekwondo schools are very kid oriented. It's very like happy, and everybody gets a trophy, and it's very a lot of them are high energy, and there's like music playing and all like it's just real different. When
mm.
I did Taekwondo, it was I would almost say like a military discipline. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Uh, I've noticed in Taekwondo they still go through the motions of respect when you enter the dojo, or when you. I'm using Japanese terms. When you enter the dojo, or then when you uh, or respect for your teacher.
Yeah.
Um,
And you click your heels together when the teacher comes in a military fashion.
right. Oh, sure. They still go through those motions, but when I
Hmm.
was young, back in the 1980s, it was still very, very disciplined, and um, it, it was a way of life.
Mm.
So when you did something wrong, you were disciplined for it. The fighting was harder. You know what I mean? I'm trying to describe it without, saying that we were going through military training, because we weren't. But it was just more disciplined, harder work, and we sweat. We came to the point of exhaustion. I mean, I remember going through some of the forms, and some one of our teachers made us go into deep stances and hold them for so long
Hmm.
that I almost threw up twice that day. I remember,
Yeah.
just
Almost like
because.
yoga, you hold a pose and you just get exhausted from holding still.
Right. And I remember our teachers testing us hard when we would go for our black belt testing, and they would do these rings where they'd have all the fighters take a number, and then your teacher calls out a number, and that guy comes in and just nails you as hard as he can for as long as he can, and then he leaves, and then the next guy comes in. So when you've got 10 guys surrounding you, you're just totally tanked, totally exhausted, and you're just messed up, and you're hurt, and you're bruised, and then another fresh guy comes in and starts whooping up on you. You know what I mean?
Oh man, yeah.
So
What do
so
they call
things
it? A
like that.
kumite or something like that?
Yeah, so things like that, that's where how I grew up doing taekwondo. You know what I mean?
Wow,
So
that's pretty hardcore.
and I remember I was particularly good at sparring. So my teacher would get much older students. God, I remember I was probably 12 one time. How old was I? I'm just gonna say I was 12.
Okay.
And my teacher ended up getting this kid who was 18, and told him just to go out, just to go as hard as he could on me. And And yeah, it's hard when you're when you're 12 years old having to fight hard against this 18-year-old kid. And he ended up on accident, of course, but his foot pad ended up getting whatever. I guess it brushed up against my head pad, and
Uh-huh.
his toenail came out and hit me in the eye.
Oh, it's
And
like
I ended
sliced your cornea.
yeah, it ended up cutting my eyelid, and
Mm.
I had a sty hanging in my eye for
Oh no.
forever. And it was like
Gross.
having a sandpaper in your eye 24/7
Yeah.
for weeks. It was terrible.
Oh, I believe
But
it. That's crazy.
but
Yeah, you can get a
yeah,
toe in the
so
eyeball doing Taekwondo.
but that and again, coming down to the discipline was really, really, really important and really stressed
Hmm.
where when I was doing Taekwondo. So that discipline translated into the character that I gave to Hazuki.
Okay.
And I thought about um, how Iwao must have been teaching Ryo, right? And I was thinking, because of the dialogue, because of the things that he said, I knew that he was teaching everything he knew to his son, but he wasn't being nice to him because he was family. He was actually maybe even making it harder on him. That's just the impression that I got.
Yeah, because it's your dad. He's going extra hard.
Right.
Like, look
He's
how
going
Fukusan turned out. I don't think Iwao went that hard on him.
right. And I think I think that's probably because he put all of his energy into Rio, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the impression that I got. And the discipline probably went through his entire life, through his schooling. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure if he didn't get straight A's, there was, some kind of hell to pay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I had that impression that he was a very loving father, but that he demanded a lot
Yeah.
of.
I don't know.
That's
Is it okay to say tiger dad, or I don't know what we would call that, but a very, very strict father anyway.
Yeah, I think so. Whatever people can put onto that to whatever phrase you want to use that people can understand.
Yeah.
I think again, I don't think that he was cruel. I don't think that he was unreasonable. I
Right.
just think that he was a very disciplined father, just from the impression that I got.
Right.
And that those ideas translated into how I did the Hazuki character. So
Oh, fascinating. I'm so grateful that you're sharing some of your method with us because I know that's very personal to an artist, but I really think that's cool and it's very gratifying to have some of my suspicions confirmed that Sega and Yu Suzuki would be looking for somebody with a background in martial arts to do their voice acting. I was reading a funny story in a retro game magazine about how when Yu Suzuki was developing the first Virtua Fighter, he hired this American guy named what was his name? I think it was something Buchanan.
okay.
And anyway, he was a former Marine
Hmm.
with a background in a lot of martial arts. I think he knew line. I think that's what it's called, the Marine style martial arts. But
Right.
he commented that he thought it was funny because Yu Suzuki was looking at all the programmers and watching them program. Here's the punches, here's the throws, here's the kicks, and Yu Suzuki would just go, uh, I think we're gonna have to put all of you nerds in a martial arts program. And they're like, no, like the Buchanan guy was like, they were not happy about it. I don't think they were into it because they're just
Right.
like on their little laptops. And I could just see Suzuki-san being like, I mean, this is just in my mind's eye, but just being like, you must learn to take a punch. No, please, Suzuki-san, you must do it. No, like they send him over and make him get punched in the eye. Then they come back and code it.
Well, the thing is that um and that doesn't surprise me, because if you think about all the other methods that he has used to get something right, he really does not want to compromise. He does the best he can
Hmm.
to make a great game, and I haven't heard that story, but that does not surprise me if
No.
he would make his programmers go take some sort of martial arts class, because
Yeah.
you can emulate, you can look at a throw, or you could look at a punch, and you can try and emulate that, but
Mhm.
you don't know what it feels like. You don't know
Yeah.
Hearing a sound, like if you hear somebody get thrown to the mat, that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely different to have that feeling of your body getting hit to the mat,
having
and
been thrown and then hearing it.
Reverberation go through your body.
Definitely. Yeah. Oh, by the way, incidentally, the guy's name was Jeff Buchanan. So
Okay.
finally remembered that. Um, I think that for me, the background of Shenmue in the martial arts and in Virtua Fighter is a huge selling point.
Mhm.
I remember feeling a tinge of disappointment when Yu Suzuki was saying, "Sorry, we're not going to use any of the Virtua Fighter assets," because I'm a big Virtua Fighter fan.
Yeah.
But I think that uh, one of the coolest parts about Shenmue is that it has the soul of a Virtua Fighter RPG, and I just hope that people in the market for video games today can understand that and give it a chance, because I think they'll find something truly special in this series.
Yeah. It's interesting. We were just talking about this, and I kind of had this idea. People were talking about martial arts in the 70s and stuff like that, and how somebody like Bruce Lee was probably, without people noticing, may have been one of the world's first mixed martial artists, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because he was the kind of guy who grew up with a martial art and realized that, oh yeah, there are some fallacies that I need to address. So let's start learning other martial arts. And famously, Bruce Lee started going around the world, started learning different martial arts, and was quite surprised to find out that, there are all kinds of great disciplines out there, and there are all kinds of great um, uh, moves that he needed um, to make a part of his library, a part of his martial arts library, right? So
Right.
I kind of feel like Hazuki is the same way, right?
Yeah.
He maybe is a mixed martial artist, right? Where he grew up learning karate and like judo moves and stuff like that, right? Or some jujitsu moves and that kind of thing, right?
Right.
But then as he goes along his journey, oh well, he learns a tornado kick from Tom. Okay, cool. And then he learns some kung fu over here, or he learns different types of kung fu, and then you realize like, oh well, this move, and each player has something different, right?
Right.
Each player's like, oh, this move really works well for me. That timing works well. It's a really big hit, but I can get that distance and come in with the whatever moves that they particularly like. And that's one reason why I like Shenmue, because when I see other people fight, obviously they use different moves than I do. So
Yes.
each character is going to be different. So I think it's great when they're learning different moves in different disciplines that they're incorporating that differently than I do. Anyway, so
Yeah.
I think about Ryo as being a mixed martial artist as well, right? He
Right.
started out with one thing in life that he thought maybe was probably pretty good, and then he realized, oh wait, that's not the be all end all. There are other moves that work, and when he confronts different bad guys in life, they have different specialties, and he needed to learn something new to be able to overcome that new enemy.
Mm-hmm.
So as he goes through his life, he's becoming a better martial artist, and yeah, maybe he'll be ready for the UFC that happens in the early 1990s.
Yeah,
Cool.
maybe, or at least for Land D, right? I think, yeah, through the assimilation, not just of the martial arts techniques, but the cultural values that go along with them, I think it will make him a strong enough person to be able to confront Lan Di, not necessarily to defeat him in combat, but just to be a big enough person to keep his humanity and find it once again. So,
And yeah, a lot of people talk about this too, and we talked about it a little bit earlier in this interview, that and a lot of things that are lost in martial arts today, and I'm not talking about a lot of woo woo stuff that some of the old martial arts philosophies talk about, but I'm
mhm,
talking about just combat philosophy in general.
yes.
I remember my daughter was talking about how she wanted to learn some martial arts from me. And so we would go to the park, and we would I would start teaching her some of the basics and stuff like that. And I said, okay, but something else that we're going to learn that people don't talk very much about today is martial arts philosophy. And after we would have our practice in the park, we would go home and we would look up different speeches or different quotes that people have about martial arts, or even just combat in general. I mean, great quotes from Winston Churchill and things like that. And so I would say, okay, this is maybe a quote from Bruce Lee. What does that mean to you? And so we would discuss that, and that is something that adds a lot of value, because I think the physical aspect of martial arts is only part of the story. Mm-hmm. And your mind needs to be able to be attached to that. It mm-hmm. needs to have a certain philosophy in order to complete your training. And I think a lot of martial artists today, it's all about sport, or it's all about
fitness.
Or fitness, you know what I mean? And
sure.
That's fine if you want to get in shape using martial arts. I think that's great. Mm-hmm. Or it's all about making money, if you are fighting in the UFC and that kind of thing. And I understand that. But
yeah,
most martial artists today are missing a big part of the story, and that's something that I grew up on. Yeah. And that is the mental aspect of it as well.
Definitely.
But we do get that in Shenmue. And that's something that you just mentioned, where a lot of his teachers are teaching him new moves, whether it's some of the kung fu moves that he learns from the old man in the park, or maybe he learns from, Tom or whatever, right? But many of these teachers give him a philosophical thought, something that makes him grow as a person.
Yep.
And that's one thing that I love about Shenmue, is that it's not just about, his quest for revenge. And maybe he thinks that that's what's happening right now, but he realizes the further he goes on, the more that he grows as a person, because of the knowledge that's being passed to him.
Absolutely.
Through people.
Yeah, like with the Wudu, the 4 Wudu. And, I think that these are games about a young man who's undergoing a spiritual crisis. And I need to see this resolved. I need to, because it just resonates with your soul, because everybody goes through that at some point in their life. Everyone needs to have that spiritual growth to encounter life's trials and tribulations. And that's why I really hope Shenmue 3 goes very, very well in sales economically, and so that we can get a Shenmue 4, 5. We want to keep Corey Marshall coming back until the whole beard is gray for all the Shenmues. I think one of the ways that you can help to promote the economic success of a game is to do crossovers.
Crossovers.
Yeah. Okay. So Ryo Hazuki's been in Project X Zone 2.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He's been, or maybe it's called Project Cross Zone. He was actually in an NFL 2K game for the Xbox as well. He was a lineman. You probably knew about that. He's in a bunch of different funny things. I wanted to ask you, and everybody, this is just pure speculation. We have no insider information about any possible crossovers whatsoever. But if your fantasy could be a reality, are you able to give your opinion on what you think would be a great crossover for Ryo Hazuki in a game in a game series that either exists or doesn't?
And this is not my idea. Somebody brought up the idea of Yakuza.
Mm.
And I thought, ooh, that sounds really interesting to have for Hazuki to go back to Japan at a later date or something like that, and actually interact with some of the Yakuza characters.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people kind of think that Yakuza might be the brother to Shenmue or something like that, right? That they might be related in some way, that they're the cousin or something like that.
Yeah, like Shenmue's had a lot of influences on Yakuza for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when somebody brought that up, I thought, oh, that might be really good idea because Hazuki does have to deal with a lot of a lot of underground gang related activity and stuff like that. I was like, that could be a world that he is already familiar with, and that's something that he could uh, find himself, well, not comfortably, but at least a world that he is familiar with, that he would
Yeah.
be able to navigate with some experience. And I think it would be great. People have
Yeah.
mentioned that before. I thought that was a fantastic idea.
That's an absolutely great idea. DLC boss fight for Ryo Hazuki fighting either Kiryu or Goro. Let's make that
Yeah,
happen. Come on,
yeah.
Sega, you can do it. Let's do
They
that.
could,
Would
come
you
on.
would you be willing to voice that, Corey? For the English
Um,
localization?
yeah, absolutely. And I think let's see, Hazuki would definitely be older at that time, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how old would Hazuki be if he's 18 in 1986. How old would that make him in a Yakuza series?
Well, Yakuza 0 took place in the 80s. Took place in
Okay,
86. So it depends
okay,
on which time period. You could just have it be a supplemental DLC and it could take because I think the Yakuza series spans like the 80s, 90s, 2000s. You could just find a timeline in there where he would fit.
yeah. And see, the thing is that I have this imagination of an older of an older Hazuki when
Mm.
he's more when he's more of his father's age. You know what I mean?
Oh, like the
So
Karate Kid reboot where it's like the old Cobra Kai guy. He's
right,
all washed
right,
up, but it's Ryo Hazuki. And they're like, please train me, Ryo. And he's like, I don't know, kid. With his leather
right,
jacket, smoking
right.
a cigarette.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, I had this idea of him being of an older person now. Like I said, more of his father's age, and maybe he has to, yeah, kind of navigate that world, and maybe he could talk about some of his life experiences that he had to go through, and maybe some of his ideas about revenge and what is really important in life and all that kind of stuff. I suppose we would have to get the end of Shenmue first, right? So I don't know if that's going to be, if we're going to stop at 3 or if we're going to do 4 or 5 or whatever, but we'd have to see where that story goes before we could really get an accurate count of his character.
Sure,
But
yeah. Or maybe
I
we could
think
do
that'd be
even a
great.
prequel, like a prequel game where Kiryu's in a bar and there's some sailors and some kid breaks in and starts beating up the sailors,
Right.
getting information. That would be really cool. You could do it. There's ways you could do it. I like all the ideas you've put forth there. I had kind of an idea I wanted to run by you, and maybe you could pitch this if you ever get the opportunity to have some influence or ideas. Have you
Okay.
heard of this video game called Fighters Megamix?
Fighters Megamix.
Yeah, it's somewhat obscure. It's for the Sega Saturn.
Okay.
And the Sega Saturn had two, well, actually had several pretty popular 3D fighting games, but two of the most prominent were, of course, Virtua Fighter
Right.
and Fighting Vipers. And
Oh, okay.
they took those two game franchises and stuck them together in a crossover game called Fighters Megamix. So it was basically VF versus FV.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and then they even took people from Virtua Cop, threw them in there. They took people from Daytona. The car from Daytona, USA. They just put it in there as a fighter. So like this car just shows up and starts like putting its tire on your face and like grinding your face and stuff. It's pretty cool.
Nice.
Uh, there are characters from Sonic the Hedgehog that just jump in and punch you. So a lot of cool stuff like that. I feel like if we could make a Fighters Megamix 2, I mean this game hasn't had a sequel ever. And then you
Okay.
could get all these great Sega, make a Super Smash Brothers game. I'm not sure if you're
Yeah.
familiar with it,
Yeah.
but with all the Sega characters.
That'd be awesome. I'd
Right.
love that.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and we'll have to get some some really great what would Hazuki's like some of his special moves be? Some of his like
Yeah.
one of his combo moves or knockout moves
De-
or something like that.
Definitely his elbow assault,
Mm-hmm.
pulling that elbow in there. And it depends because I think he kind of fights. Ryo Hazuki is interesting because he's basically a Virtua Fighter character where
Mm-hmm.
he's taken um, most of the good guys' moves. Like all the protagonists of Virtua Fighter, like he's got Jackie Bryant, he's got some Wolf Hawkfield moves, he's got some Jeffrey McWild in him, he's got some uh, Leon Raphael. He's got Kagemaru. He's got a lot of stuff. Like he'll do some ninja moves 1 minute, then he'll do some of Akira's moves with his elbow. Then he'll flip around and do Pai-Chan and flip people around. So he's kind of an amalgam of all those Virtua Fighter characters. So you could really go nuts with him and make him into sort of a cross of all the best Virtua Fighters.
Right. There's that Hazuki old school mixed martial artist thing going on.
That's right, man. I think that would be cool. Yeah, I want to get Sega, if you're listening, you might not be, but please get Corey Marshall in as many things as you can. Get Ryo Hazuki into as many things as you can. That would be so cool. We want to see Ryo everywhere. It'd be really fun. Thanks for kind of fantasizing there with me, nerding out, Corey. It's kind of fun.
Absolutely.
Now, to kind of transition away from Shenmue, that probably doesn't happen too often, but I want to know some of your favorite projects in which you've been a collaborator besides Shenmue, because you've done almost everything in show business, and I think we really disservice ourselves when we don't get to hear about those other experiences you've had.
Sure. Yeah, well, I have to say that being a voiceover artist is definitely one of the best jobs because you can go in looking like whatever you want, you can wear whatever you want, and it's all just about your voice, right? So you get to be able to, do great work and not have to work so hard. Yeah. But at the same time, some of my favorite work is working really hard, and I don't know why I like to work so hard, but I guess that maybe it's just in my nature.
Right.
A couple of things that come to mind is that I used to work for this company called Megatrend, and I was a producer with that, and we were working with Capitol Records. We were like, I'm trying to make a long story short. We were making film length features, or I should say, featuring an artist's music. Mm-hmm. So the idea was that most people buy singles nowadays, right? Yeah. And you don't get to hear albums anymore. And I worked with Brett Leonard, who did Virtuosity, Longmore Man, all that kind of stuff. And his idea was, well, we want to take an artist and feature their entire album, and we'll make that not just the soundtrack, but that'll be almost a character that drives the story. You know what I mean? We'll get to hear the lyrics, we'll get to hear all those songs, and we'll put a story over the top of that.
Yeah.
And I love that concept, love that idea. It was a lot of work, a lot of hours. But I really love that job because there was a lot of everything from when I was, being a producer in a small company like that. I had to do everything, draw up contracts, do auditions, casting as well, and manage the budget and talk about shots and how much this was going to cost and how much that was going to cost and location, and then I had to go drive the van as well. You know what I mean? It's like wow. I basically had to do everything, and that was I have to say, even though I liked doing that because I liked being such a big part of a production like that. Mm-hmm. I ended up stopping that job because my daughter was born, and again, to make a long story short, she was starting to walk and talk, and I was missing it. She was still asleep when I had to get up so early in the morning. I had to leave and go to work, and then we were filming all day, and then I would get home and my daughter was asleep again, or we were out in location wherever. If we had to go to Vegas, we had to go to Vegas once, and I spent several days out there. And I remember my wife was sending me pictures or videos of Katana literally starting to talk, and I was like, I'm missing it.
And you're like, I'm missing it. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So I ended up quitting that job to be with my daughter. But another thing that I used to love too was I did stunt work, and I started out doing the Batman show over at Six Flags. Whoa. And that was a lot of fun. Sam Heughan from Outlander did the same thing. He was actually Batman in one of the Batman stunt shows.
Whoa.
And so we have that connection going on. But I started doing some stunt work and videos and stuff like that. I ended up doing, if anybody wants to see something funny, there's a band called the Old 97s. and we did a whole uh, huge long stunt fight in that one, and it's basically for me from beginning to end, uh, trying to get to Trisha Helfer from Battlestar Galactica,
Yeah.
and a bunch of other things, of course. Fighting my way through club security to go and try and get her autograph, and that one was really hard because I had to go pick up a bunch of weight because I'm supposed to look like a guy who can't do anything, right? So
Oh,
I ended up getting myself up to 220 pounds, and I had a big old beard and everything, and
yeah.
I go through the club and I tear through the security like it's just like it's nothing, you know what I mean? And I finally get the Trisha Helfer at the end, so that's a fun video. Ended up doing a My Chemical Romance video as well, with the uh, with when they did the video for the Watchmen and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Wow,
But
that's really cool. See, emo is not dead, people. You heard it here.
right, and we ended up playing some of the characters in the comic, and there's a scene outside where we're getting a fight with the cops and all that kind of stuff, and there's a few other stunts that happen in that one. That's a fun video, so I think people should go back and remember that one too.
That's really cool.
But
Did you do stunt work for a movie called Frankenstein versus the Creature from Blood Cove, or were you an actor in that one?
yeah, I that was one of the first jobs that I took when I got here, and they ended up having me be several creatures in that one. Man, I think I was like a wolf man. I was that creature from Blood Cove, which is basically the creature from the Black Lagoon,
Yeah.
and um there is a bar scene where Frankenstein rips a dude's arm off. That was me.
That was your
Uh,
arm?
yeah, that
The
was his
prop.
arm he ripped off, and then like I don't remember if he punched me or if he hit me with the arm. I don't even remember, but I ended up flying over a table and all that kind of stuff. So
That
yeah, I
movie
ended
looked
up
awesome. I was watching the trailers and I was like, that looks up my alley. I really like it had kind of a B movie flavor to it. It looked really fun.
yeah, that's if people want to remember that B movie, um that old, the old, like that, what am I trying to say? Oh, like the old monster Universal films, that kind of stuff that had a lot of inspiration from stuff like that.
Nice.
And so if people love that kind of thing, then go for it. It's definitely a certain flavor of film.
Cool.
But yeah, that, oh man, they took a whole body cast of me, literally from head to toe. They took a body cast of me. Of course, they took my head and face. They took my teeth. They took my hands, of course, because they had to make all these apparatuses for claws and everything else. So
That sounds like that sounds really cool. See, I don't think many people realize just how many projects you've had a hand in and been so involved in. So I appreciate that's such a treat to hear that. Um, it's kind of like if it could be in the same canon, Ryo Hazuki turns into the creature from Blood Cove. Just keep the continuity going like that, and you get to see Ryo Hazuki fighting Frankenstein. It's kind of fun.
yeah, so maybe he has the ability to turn into different creatures for uh, to suit his situation, right? So like he's got to cross the ocean or something, right? So he turns into the creature, so he can swim, forever and breathe water and everything. But maybe
Yeah,
he
he's a
gets
Kappa demon.
and then he turns into the werewolf or something like that, so he can destroy some bad guys or something.
Heck yeah, man. That sounds sick. See, I like where we're going with this. By the way, speaking of B movies, because I'm trying to be very considerate of your time, Corey,
Okay.
I mentioned earlier, but right before the podcast, when we were talking, that I'm a big fan of a lot of B movies. I like Samurai Cop. I like Hard Ticket to Hawaii. I like The Room. I prepared a list of some of Tommy Wiseau's most notable quotes, I guess you could say, from The Room. And I wanted to ask you if you could reprise your role as Ryo Hazuki with Tommy Wiseau's quotes.
Okay, so you want me to do Tommy, but as Hazuki? You
Yeah,
want me
be
to do?
Ryo and just read his lines. Yeah.
All right. Okay. I'll bring these up just a second.
You might have to pause between fits of laughter, but
Okay. Okay. I have it here. Okay. I'm so happy to have you as my best friend. And I love Lisa so much. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
That's so great. I'm crying over here. Oh, keep going.
How's your sex life? I got the results from the test back. I definitely have breast cancer. Chicken, Peter, you're just a little chicken. Cheap, 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 cheap.
There you have it, folks. The great Corey Marshall. Oh, that was excellent.
I did not.
I did not.
I did not. How?
Great.
Right.
I hope somebody out there makes a mod of Ryo Hazuki and just like puts him into like the room, switches him out with Tommy Wiseau. That'd be hilarious.
You know that the it's so funny. You know, people talk about the room. I remember, of course, living here in LA for so long. I remember seeing the first. In fact, there's that famous billboard of the room that's been up there forever. And for people who don't know, you have got to see this movie. It's one of those things that's and what you do is that you see it with a bunch of friends, right? You all sit down on the couch, maybe have some snacks or maybe some other treats if that's what you're into. And you guys have to all watch this movie. So I remember seeing the billboard. Tommy Wiseau took out this whole billboard and it had the room and it had his face looking real, serious, and it said, for reservations, call this. And I thought, man, what is that? Is that like an intense acting course? Like what is the room? What's that? What's all that about? Looks all serious, and I thought, oh man, maybe this is like some acting guru or something. It's like, for reservations, call this number. And it had been up there for years and years and years, and I never knew what it was until it started becoming that cult classic that people just love to watch over and over and over again. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
I watch great movies like I don't know, like like The Godfather, right? I've seen The Godfather maybe a couple of times. You know what I mean? But there are some people who have seen The Room, I don't know, 100 times, right? Like, they can't get enough of The Room. And again, they see it with all their friends and like, what? You haven't seen The Room yet? Well, that's what we're doing tonight.
Well, Citizen Kane, what's that? But I've seen The Room 50 times.
Citizen Kane. I think I've seen Citizen Kane once. And Same. Anybody who doesn't know Citizen Kane, you should probably at least see it once, because it's a great film. But
yeah, it's like the first modern film, and every film has basically copied it.
Right? I mean, we're talking about how Shenmue changed the industry for sure. Citizen Kane changed the industry, and we use their techniques as far as lighting and as far as camera angles and all that kind of stuff. We still use those techniques today. So yeah, people need to see that movie. But that is a fantastic, great movie, right? I think I've only seen it once.
Yeah, same here. But if I had to draw a parallel between Shenmue and a movie, I'd sooner draw it with Citizen Kane than The Room, obviously.
All right.
I definitely would.
I was trying to make a comparison before. And I was talking about, I think at the time there were some movies that came out that won some Academy Awards. Oh, one of them was Birdman. And I was talking, you know why? Because I was making that comparison. And again, it was just the time that the movies were out. And I was talking about Avengers. And I'm like, yeah, Shenmue is not the Avengers. Mm-hmm. It's not, a huge blockbuster, major action explosions it's not like you go there and it's a rush, and the movie's over and it's 3.5 hours later and you're like, what? I thought that was only 15 minutes. You know what I mean? Shenmue was not that. And I was talking about some other movies that were out at the time, and I was like, Shenmue is almost like Birdman or something, where it's like this really, people really work hard on it. They put their heart and soul into it, and it's one of those maybe Academy Award winners that not everybody sees. You know what I mean? but the people who build games or the people who make games or even people who got into games making games or that kind of thing, it's because of Shenmue. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that's the comparison I was making at the time, and I was like, yeah, and it's kind of a cult classic. And I was trying to think of something at the time, and I thought of, I don't know why this came to mind, but I was like, yeah, it's kind of like Rocky Horror Picture Show, where you have a small group of people who love it and are fanatics about it, and anybody who hasn't seen Rocky Horror, they're the type of person who wants to get their friends to come and watch Rocky Horror Picture Show with them.
Right, because it's so quirky. It might not have the most mainstream appeal, but it's so good. That's a great comparison.
So, and I was trying to think I was trying to come up with movie analogies, and that's just what I happened to come up with, and
I think that's as good as we've heard so far.
Okay.
Well, Corey, I wanted to play one more game with you real quick. This is called Name That NPC. There's an NPC that many Shenmue fans think has quite a likeness with your personage. Are you familiar with the name of this NPC?
Oh, so is this the guy in the Heartbeats bar?
Yes.
Who Ryo Hazuki comes in and then basically destroys him in like 1 second, throws him in the bar or something like that.
That's him.
What is his name? I was talking to Adam Koralik about that, and we were talking about some of the names of the characters that are more obscure. I don't know his name.
That's okay. I'll give it to you right now. His name's Jones Henders.
Henders. I remember Henders. Okay,
sounds like 2 last names, Jones Henders. Anyway,
Jones Henders. That's so funny. People talk about that guy, and especially when I was, like I said, I had gained all that weight for that music video, and yeah, that guy is heavier too. And
you've been on that keto. You've been on that keto, and it's working, bro. I can tell. You do not resemble Jones Henders. The only thing similar is maybe the mustache, but that's about it.
Yeah, it's funny when I looked at him, I was like, oh yeah, it's definitely me in the future, or maybe my dad. And it's funny, I don't know if anybody's ever seen a picture of my dad, but my dad loves to grow that mustache out, the handlebar mustache.
Handlebar, yeah.
Yeah, the one that comes down, and I definitely grow mine out too, but I have everything else going on, cool. And that character has it, but
yeah, sure. So a little information on him. It just says he is hired by Jimmy to attack Ryo in the Heartbeats bar.
Okay.
Age 40, height 6 foot, 232 pounds, blood type B. He's a Gemini, and he's a sailor serving aboard the same ship as a guy named Harry. He takes good care of his mustache. He is violent and unsociable, but can be warm to his friends once he gets close to them. He met Harry by losing to him in a street fight. They became friends and started hanging out together ever since. Now we know the truth behind the supposed connection.
Yeah, I know, and it's definitely sad that the character that resembles me the most, like I said, literally Hazuki comes in and just walks through him like it's air, So.
Oh, but it's you beating up you, so it's at least a tie.
That's okay. That's the weird part about it. It's like, oh yeah, I'm my avatar that I speak through is destroying the guy who looks most like me. Okay.
Well, I was actually trying to dispel that myth. I think he does not. And he is now we know the difference between he and Corey Marshall. So
yeah, it's bullshit. It's bullshit. I did not.
I do not, Mark. He's bullshit. All right, man. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Corey Marshall. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Corey, thanks for being here, being so generous with your time. Hope to definitely get to interact with you again one day.
It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Everyone, in the words of of Ryo's father, keep friends and those you love close to you, and we will see you next time. All right, so I'll just stop the recording there. Let me see. Man, that was a lot of fun. Thanks so much, Corey.
Hey, it was fun, seriously.